video about drawing feathers. One important thing to remember about feathers is, and this is the one thing I feel that people forget all the time, is that feathers aren't ever straight. I mean, if you look at the feather that I'm holding in my hand, if you look at the shaft of the feather, you see that it's not straight. You see the arc, it's not uniform. You can see the little flaws in the feather. You can kind of see the tip of the feather, how it's bent. This one is particularly bent, but how it tapers off, and it's got the fuzzy bits right here at the top. This feather, you can see how it's got that arc at the tip, how the feather breaks away from itself, fuzzy bits. And then you can also see the very tip. And I think knowing what a feather looks like in your mind is really important to drawing a feather. You're not going to be able to just kind of draw a leaf. Even though they're similar, it's important to remember that feathers have a unique shape. And then there are lots of different kinds of feather. A tail feather is going to be more rounded, whereas a wing feather is going to have a broader end, and then it's going to come straight and taper out towards the tip. So it all really just depends on the type of feather you're trying to draw as well. Now to get started. When you start with your feather, you're going to draw the centerpiece, the main vein of the feather first. And that gives you the roadmap for the rest of the feather. Leave it just a little bit open. You see one side is much thicker than the other, and so I'm going to do more shading on that side because of that. And eventually it tapers off. Easy to clean up any weird blobs and smudges using the tip of your comb. And you can shade inside this base. You can choose to leave it alone. Now you notice that it stops here, and I didn't taper it off like most feathers. The reason for this is I'm going to give it like a beaded look. So I'm going to do dots, which make it look a little bit differently, like there's some finish to it, right? Okay, from there, going to draw the feather itself. It tapers down. We've got the wispy bits that come off, because any natural feather that hasn't been altered by a human is going to have these. And I'm going to determine where I want the breaks in the feather. I know these pieces look strange, like they don't really have a purpose. But once I draw the feather around it, it will begin to make sense. Okay, coming down, connect to this line. Soften up the tip of the feather. Okay, so we've got the feather, we've got the really thick edge on this side, the really thin edge on that side, and the thick Making this line up just a little bit. Wipe that away. And now we add the touches that make it very feather-like. Very thin shading, actual feather itself. The feathery part. And you can do this a few ways. One is to take it like this, to shade the inside and make the actual strands of the feather the darker pieces. Or you can fill the feather in and make the wispy bits the feather itself. Instead of having it be like it is in mine, you can make the darker area be the feather and then pull the henna out of it so that you've got empty spaces instead. Some feathers, depending on the type of feathers, like an eagle feather for example, they have spots in them, so you could add like a darker shaded area like this and then pull your comb through to make it lighter in the center. Let's see, I can go through here and pull some out from the thicker side. So this edge of the feather is darker. Now depending on the type of feather you do, you might want to go through and then lightly shade the inside so that it has a little bit of color to it. I'm barely putting anything down, so it'll be just a little bit darker than her natural skin tone. Okay. Another thing you can do for a feather is if you're going to do a solid one, do it right here. And this one does have a curve to it too, but this one's got more of an S curve. And I'm going to only lay down the one line, and it's going to be kind of thick. Once again, I'm going to do the beaded top on the feather. And you can do any kind of top to your feather. You can do it so it's wrapped. You can leave it so it looks like an actual feather. So it comes down to that point like a feather would, like in this one. When you look at it, it actually has that point right there. You could do like a quill tip so it looks like it's a pen. It all depends on what you like. And some other very popular feathers are going to be peacock feathers. And those have a lot of wispy bits, like these little wispy bits that I'm drawing here. But almost the whole shaft is the downy stuff. It all depends on the feather you're trying to draw. See, if you look at this feather, it's got a very narrow side to it. And if you look at this feather right here, the feathers I had shown you, you notice that this side is wide and goes to the narrow, whereas this side is more bladed and it's wider. Every feather is unique in its appearance, and it doesn't hurt to go through and find pictures of feathers so you can get an idea. going to the craft store and looking at the selection of feathers there is great. You got to remember though that almost all of those feathers are adjusted by human hands. When we would gather feathers when I was a child, we would spend hours making the feathers pretty by washing them and drying them very carefully and using a lamp actually, putting the feather up against a light bulb and then pulling it straight to force it into a shape that was more pleasing to our eye. So remember that natural feathers have a lot of arc and turn and twist to them, where man-wrought feathers, man-dyed feathers are not going to have that because they've been twisted and pulled to a pleasing for humans shape. And it all depends on what kind of feather you want to draw. If you want it to be a natural looking feather, if you want it to be the kind of feather that you buy at the store, that you find on a Native American's regalia. There's feathers.